The chamber thrummed with unspoken tension. High above the council floor, silver arches gleamed under the soft pulse of artificial starlight. Delegates from 100 worlds sat in quiet rows, each suspended on floating graph platforms arranged in a vast, concentric amphitheater. From afar, the Galactic Council looked serene, orderly, unified. It was anything but. At the center, on a raised disc, stood Ambassador Celine Ward, Earth's representative. Alone, upright, dressed in a tailored graphite black suit stitched with faint blue threads, she exuded stillness. A diplomat's calm. But her jaw was tight. Across from her, seated with relaxed arrogance, was Lord HFY of the Dravari hegemony. A broad-chested saurian with burnished scales, dark crimson robes, and a face made for snarls. Beside him, his aides shifted with anticipation. They knew what was coming. Celine did, too. A sonorous chime rang. The High Arbiter's voice echoed across the chamber, emotionless and mechanical. By request of the hegemony, and in accordance with Article 3.4 of Council Emergency Protocol, we now hear the formal petition for collective action against Planet 525 Human, colloquially known as Earth. Celine's eyes scanned the assembly, some curious, some indifferent, a few glaring openly. HFY stood. Fellow species of the Accord, he began, voice deep and sharpened with practiced drama, the humans are a contagion. Barely 2 decades in space, yet they spread like infection. They reverse-engineer forbidden technologies, trespass into dead zones, violate every protocol. This species does not grow. It metastasizes. A low murmur passed through the council tiers. They are unstable, he continued, driven by emotion and chaos. Worse, they lack genetic regulation. Their culture celebrates violence, even madness. They solved faster-than-light travel by accident and now use it to trespass freely. If we do not intervene, we endanger every world within 50 parsecs. Celine's lips pressed into a thin line. I therefore move, HFY concluded, that the Accord authorize a joint military strike against Earth, immediate, total, and final. He returned to his seat. The silence afterward felt vacuum-tight. Then Celine stepped forward. Permission to address the chamber, she said, voice steady. The Arbiter nodded. Granted. She took a breath. Let's be clear, Celine began. This isn't a security concern. It's fear. You fear what humanity represents, not because we're reckless, but because we don't follow your script. She let that sink in. Yes, we adapted your technology. But we did it in weeks. You fear how fast we learn. You fear our unpredictability. You fear that in our chaos, we survive. A few heads turned. One delegate from the Carthari leaned in, intrigued. You see our wars, our scars, and assume we're broken. But those scars are the reason we're still here. She placed a small, black object on the table, a cube of scorched metal. This is from a human city called Kiev. 20th century. After it burned. Humans made this before we had fusion. Before we had clean air. Before we had peace. A few gasps. The cube clicked softly. A faint hologram flickered to life, silent footage of ruins, broken statues, civilians fleeing fire. You think we're dangerous now, she said. Imagine what we became after that century. There was a pause. I'm not here to beg. And I'm not here to deny what we are. I'm here to offer one last moment of sanity. She turned toward the upper tiers, her gaze sweeping. Before you vote to strike Earth, I ask for one formal session to make our case. Not just to argue against invasion, but to help you understand what you'd be starting. Her tone sharpened. Because if you invade us, it won't be a war. It'll be extinction. For all of us. The finality in her voice drew real silence. Even HRRVAC's claws stopped tapping. A pause. Then the arbiter's voice again. Motion to allow the human delegate a single address session. Votes. The holographic vote tallies began to rise, blue for approval, red for denial. At first, red dominated. Then blue rose. One by one. Reluctant, but steady. The motion passed. Celine exhaled, slow, measured. As the council adjourned for the solar cycle, she stepped off the platform. Her aide, Marcus, met her at the bottom of the corridor. "You bought us time," he whispered. "Barely. Time's all we ever needed," Celine said. Time, and someone willing to listen. Behind her, in the echo of the great chamber, the gears of diplomacy ground into motion. And just beyond the station's edge, half a dozen war fleets waited in orbit, engines cold, weapons primed, ready for a war that hadn't started yet. Not yet. But the galaxy had just been warned. The chamber was colder this time. Not physically, the climate controls aboard the Argent Spire kept conditions within a perfect range for over 80 species. But the air felt heavier. Like the room itself was holding its breath. Celine Ward stood alone at the center again. Her hair was pulled into a tight coil, her stance poised and deliberate. The faint flicker of the cube she'd placed earlier still pulsed on the table before her. This was the moment. She didn't smile. She didn't clear her throat or ask for silence. She simply began. "You call us unstable, dangerous, prone to violence. You're not wrong. But you're missing something important." She stepped forward, her voice calm, not raised, yet it carried to every level of the chamber. "You're mistaking survival for savagery." A map of Earth shimmered to life beside her, topographical, pale blue and green. It rotated slowly as she spoke. "We evolved on a death world. Our skies sparked with storms, our lands shook with quakes, our oceans swallowed whole civilizations. Every step forward we took was clawed out of chaos." The map changed, showing images from humanity's ancient history, stone tools, fire, battle-scarred cities. Before we ever met another species, we met the worst in ourselves. We fought over gods, dirt, skin color. We turned fields into graveyards and made weapons faster than we made peace. She gestured, and the image shifted to grainy footage, trenches, gas masks, charred cities. Earth's world wars, raw and ugly. This is the First World War. 20 million dead. Then came the second. Twice that number. We dropped fire from the sky that melted cities into shadows. The council chamber remained silent. Celine pressed a button. The image turned black and white, a mushroom cloud bloomed in terrifying slow motion. "You're scared of us now. But this was us when we barely understood the atom." Her voice didn't change, but something deeper tightened in her tone. "We didn't stop there. The Cold War came next, a generation living under the threat of extinction every single day. Our children learned evacuation drills instead of lullabies. We stared at each other through crosshairs and dared the world to blink." She paused. "And we survived. Not because we were noble, but because the alternative was worse." A delegate from the Karjan Empire raised a hand. "You claim this as a strength?" Celine didn't flinch. I claim it as truth. Humanity's great achievement wasn't the end of war, it was learning to fear it. To chain it. To evolve past it. She tapped her wrist console. The screen changed again, Earth in the 22nd century, gleaming towers, orbital elevators, green cities rising from old ruins. We rebuilt. We learned. We formed global pacts. Shared technology. Cleaned our air, cured ancient diseases. We connected minds across continents. We stopped nuking each other. Mostly. A soft ripple of amusement, quickly stifled. But don't mistake our progress for peace in our hearts. That remains conditional. She turned to face the upper tiers, eyes locking with the Dravari delegation. Because when something threatens our survival, the part of us that remembers fire and ash wakes up. There was no pride in her voice. Only certainty. We are not conquerors. We never wanted a galactic seat. We didn't even know we weren't alone until a probe crash-landed in South Africa. But the moment we saw the stars were full of life, the same moment we learned some of that life considered us primitive, we didn't react with awe. She took a breath. We prepared. The hologram shifted one last time. A battlefield, lunar dust rising in slow motion. Soldiers in matte black armor sprinted through low gravity, their helmets pulsing with data. Human soldiers. Young. Focused. Efficient. This is a training recording. Not combat. Not war. Just routine. That's how we raise our children now, not in fear of each other, but of you. A few delegates shifted uneasily. One, the pale, avian delegate from the Vayari Accord, leaned forward and whispered something to his neighbor. So you see, Celine said, voice softening, you're right to be afraid. But it's not because we're monsters. She stepped back. It's because we've met monsters. We studied them. And when we couldn't defeat them, we became what we had to be. Her final words lingered, heavy and unsentimental. You think we're dangerous because we're violent. That's only partly true. We're dangerous because when we are cornered, we do not stop. We break rules, we defy logic, and we do not care what the cost is. We end threats. She turned off the display. The lights dimmed slightly as the projection faded. No applause. No outrage. Just a charged silence. The kind that lives in the moments between decision and disaster. Celine gave the chamber one last look, not a challenge, but a warning wrapped in calm. If you think invading Earth will be simple, remember this, we may lose the first battle. Maybe even the first dozen. But we will never forget. We will never forgive. And we will become the thing you fear most. She stepped down. Even HFY said nothing. The lights in the council chamber dimmed once more. Celine didn't ask for attention this time. She simply walked to the center of the floor, activated the cube, and let silence do its work. The hologram sprang to life with a muted shimmer, this time not of Earth, but of deep space. A lone ship drifted through the void, its hull cracked and trailing debris. Its design was unfamiliar to most in the chamber, except for the Dravari, whose expressions had stiffened. Celine looked up, her face illuminated by the spectral light. This was the first one. A Dravari recon vessel, designation HFY 7. It entered our system 12 years ago. A few murmurs broke out across the upper tiers. Some delegates leaned forward. Others looked sideways at the Dravari block. HFY's jaw tightened. They thought we were pre-FTL. That we wouldn't notice. The projection changed. Now, Earth's orbit filled the screen, and a streak of light cutting through the atmosphere, fast and uncontrolled. They underestimated our satellites, our early warning systems, our paranoia. The ship crashed near the southern coast of Africa. Flames, impact tremors, scattered wreckage, all recorded from multiple angles. Some footage was shaky, handheld, local. We recovered the wreck before they even realized it had failed. No warning signal ever got out. She let that statement settle. They came to observe. We dismantled. The next sequence showed laboratories. Scientists in hazmat suits, engineers poring over schematics. Then, test flights. Prototypes. A human-built craft spooling up its first pulse drive under Earth's gravity. It looked rough. Crude. But it moved. Fast. Within 6 months, we broke containment. Within a year, we launched our own. A glowing diagram appeared: Earth, Mars, Europa, then Jupiter's moons. Human probes and ships leaving behind glowing trails of expansion. You ask how we advanced so quickly. The answer is simple. We stole. We reverse-engineered. We adapted without hesitation. She paused. What took you centuries, we compressed into years. Not because we're smarter. Because we had no other choice. A hologram of Earth's geopolitical map appeared, fractured, complex, filled with territorial lines. Before the crash, our world was fragmented. Nation-states, rival ideologies, economic warfare. We couldn't agree on climate policy, let alone space. A new projection overlaid the image, a treaty sigil. The crash changed everything. It gave us a common threat. A reason to unify. A voice from the upper tiers broke in, soft, uncertain. The delegate from the Vayari Accord. Feathers twitching. You, unified because of fear? Celine nodded. Yes. That's what survival looks like. It's not noble. It's necessary. She continued. 2 years after we launched our first drive-capable ship, we encountered the Dravari again. This time, not by accident. The display changed to a dark field of stars. A battle report flared across the screen, filled with tactical overlays and telemetry. They sent a test fleet to intercept us near Io. 5 ships. Heavily armed. They expected a show of dominance. She tapped the controls again. What they got was this. The feed zoomed in on a jagged asteroid field. A much smaller human ship emerged from shadow. It darted between debris, emitting false signals and plasma flares. Then, in sudden bursts, it struck railgun rounds, magnetic mines, suicide drones. One by one, the Dravari ships were crippled. The footage paused on a final image, the last enemy ship drifting, engines dark, hull split open. We lost 80% of our crew. But we didn't retreat. We didn't surrender. We outthought them. Celine turned to face the chamber again. That's the part you keep missing. We don't win because we're stronger. We win because we learn faster than anyone expects. Because we will sacrifice everything if it means surviving. Your fleets follow doctrine. Ours follow chaos. She looked up at the Carthari general in the upper circle, one of the oldest species in the Accord. You want to understand us? Stop looking at our weapons. Look at what drives us. The chamber remained still. Then, slowly, Celine activated one final display. It showed a classroom on Earth, modern, sleek, filled with children in uniforms. These are students in Nairobi. Age 12. They're not memorizing poems or equations. The screen shifted, the children were playing a game, a simulation. Dozens of variables, planetary invasion, resource management, asymmetrical warfare. They're running counterinsurgency drills. Practicing supply sabotage. Learning to plan for failure and recover mid-crisis. The next image showed older teens, flight simulators, drone operations, low-orbit target acquisition. This is how we teach now. Not because we expect war, but because we expect you. She let the screen fade. We don't raise conquerors. We raise survivors. A tense silence followed. Celine stepped back, her hands clasped behind her. The Dravari tried to test us once. They sent 5 ships. We sent back wreckage. If you test us again, don't expect even that. HRRVAC finally spoke, his voice cold. You glorify brutality. You admit your people are dangerous, unstable. Why should this council not eliminate you while it still can? Celine met his gaze, unflinching. Because we've already buried one empire. She turned and walked off the platform. No one followed. The corridor outside the Galactic Council chamber echoed with quiet tension. Celine walked briskly, her pace rigid, her mind sharper than ever. The warning had been delivered. But warnings, she knew, were only useful to those willing to listen. Rear Admiral Yao intercepted her near the observation wing. The older man's expression was grim, jaw clenched. They've started repositioning patrol fleets, he said. Dravari scouts in Sector 13, they are silent near the belt. Our backchannels say they're rattled. Celine didn't slow. Good. Let them rattle. But keep our launch codes on rotation. No predictability. Yao stepped into pace beside her. You're making enemies. She glanced at him. Better they hate us now than try to understand us too late. They reached the observation deck, a transparent dome projecting the view above Council space, an artificial star array orbiting a peaceful blue dwarf, symbolizing neutrality. It was sterile, polished. Fragile. Unlike Earth. They don't understand our history, Celine said, voice low. What we were before they even noticed us. She activated her personal holopad, and a classified feed shimmered between them. These logs are from the Kasari incident. Yao exhaled. You're opening that file? If they still think we're unproven, this will end it. The projection expanded, space footage from 7 years ago. A human mining outpost orbiting Kasari Prime, unarmed. Then, a flash. A Karthari ship decloaking, weapons hot. The strike came without warning, energy lances, fusion torpedoes, zero broadcast. Celine narrated, her tone cold. They claimed it was a navigation error. Said our beacon didn't ping the right transponder code. Called the destruction of 200 lives a tragic misunderstanding. Yao didn't respond. He didn't need to. The footage spoke louder. But then the scene shifted, a different feed, weeks later. A human ship, sleek, black-holed, unregistered, entering Karthari space. It didn't fire. It listened. It found a comms relay. Tapped in. Injected a virus. Quiet. Clean. Then, across Karthari territory, thousands of their war drones, previously inactive, activated and turned inward. Panic followed. Infrastructure collapsed. Factories malfunctioned. Their core AI grids shut down for 18 hours. No declaration. No traceable attack vector, Celine said. We never admitted it. Still haven't. Yao nodded slowly. That mission was off the books. And it will stay that way. She paused. But the Council doesn't understand why we did it. They think we retaliate out of anger. They don't realize, for us, retaliation is doctrine. A chime interrupted them. Celine tapped her earpiece. Council summons in 20. The Admiral gave her a measured look. You're about to escalate this. Celine turned off the projection and faced him directly. If I don't make them afraid of the cost, they'll gamble. And if they gamble, Earth burns. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Her logic was brutal and airtight. Back in the council hall, murmurs had returned. Some species still viewed her as an anomaly, a curiosity, too emotional, too confrontational. But as she stepped back onto the speaking platform, the lights dimmed again. No dramatics. Just truth. This is not about superiority, she began. Not about pride. This is about a fundamental misunderstanding of what humanity is capable of. She gestured toward the display. It bloomed into view, Earth, surrounded by a web of satellites, defense grids, orbital kinetic platforms. These are not weapons of conquest. They're fail-safes. Because when Earth enters a system, it always prepares for betrayal. The screen shifted to an image of a child's classroom again, this time in New Mumbai. Even our children grow up with evacuation drills. Civil war modeling. Food shortage simulations. Then, tactical exercises in a university. Non-military students running simulations on planetary occupation and insurgency resistance. You think we train for glory? We train for collapse. That's our baseline. A delegate from the Kalari Confederacy, a delicate, translucent species of logic-born traditions, raised a hand. This is paranoia, not preparation. Celine looked directly at her. We survived our own extinction curve. Twice. Environmental collapse. Nuclear brinkmanship. Biological warfare. The only thing that kept us from falling apart was obsession. She let that settle. You call it paranoia. We call it insurance. A brief pause. Which brings us to the Dravari. The chamber went still again. Celine brought up the intercepted fleet movement logs, confidential intelligence. Unauthorized, but necessary. Dravari ships were repositioning near Sol's outer rim. Not warships. Not scouts. Cargo haulers. Support vessels. The kind that followed behind after someone else did the damage. These aren't probes. They're infrastructure. You don't bring colonization scaffolding unless you expect someone else to clear the path. HRRVAC stirred. You presume much from minimal data. Celine's reply was swift. And you assume we won't act before confirming. You're wrong. A final projection, a classified prototype launched days earlier, the Dauntless. Human-made, interstellar stealth, equipped with plasma-laced dark matter warheads and AI targeting that didn't require human oversight. You threaten our planet, she said, and we'll send ghosts that don't speak. Drones that don't broadcast. Weapons that don't need us anymore. Now it wasn't just fear in the room, it was realization. The Dravari weren't facing a pre-FTL species anymore. They were facing a civilization that had compressed the cruelty of centuries into mere decades, and come out the other side hungry, lean, and utterly without mercy when survival was on the line. Invading Earth, Celine said finally, won't be a campaign. It will be a trauma. One your cultures will speak of in whispers for generations. She stepped down without waiting for permission. The council chamber had never been so quiet. After Celine's final address, no one dared speak. Delegates exchanged glances but said nothing. The words still lingered in the air like ash. Invading Earth will be a trauma. High Chancellor Vren tapped his staff once. The gesture echoed, signaling the session's last phase, final deliberation and vote. On the surface, it was procedure. But everyone present knew this was no ordinary policy vote. This was a decision that would shape how the galaxy viewed Earth for the next 1,000 years. Celine sat alone on her Delegate platform, posture still, mind racing beneath the calm. She'd said everything that needed saying. She'd pulled classified footage, risked diplomatic isolation, burned bridges that might never be rebuilt. She didn't care. Her eyes flicked to the Dravari delegation. HRR-VAC was speaking softly into a translator node, conferring with a pair of stone-faced strategists. They didn't look angry. They looked calculating. The Chancellor's voice finally broke the silence. We proceed to vote. Proposal 879-ED, Strategic Sanctions Against Earth. Vote affirmative to initiate soft containment of Terran expansion or a negative to maintain current standing. It was a sanitized way of saying, do we start preparing to crush them? One by one, the votes began. Celine watched, her jaw tight. The Kalari abstained. The Vayari, predictably, voted affirmative. The Omri, a species long allied with Earth, went negative. Then came a ripple. The Lton Empire, silent for decades, voted negative. A tremor of shock passed through the chamber. The shift continued. Votes began to swing. Neutral blocks flipped. The tide was turning. The Dravari delegation, the Chancellor intoned. HRR-VAC stood slowly. His robes shimmered, heavy with rank. When he spoke, his voice was measured, almost regretful. The Dravari do not fear Earth. But we respect clarity. And today, clarity has been delivered. He turned, eyes locking with Celine's. We vote negative. Celine didn't react outwardly. Internally, her muscles unclenched, molecule by molecule. The tension didn't vanish, but it shifted. This wasn't victory. This was a warning heeded. The Chancellor raised his staff once more. The vote stands, Proposal 879-ED is defeated. Earth retains full council status. The chamber exhaled. Celine stood slowly. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, some in awe, some in quiet resentment. She hadn't won them all. But she'd won enough. As she stepped down, her calm earpiece chirped softly. Ambassador Ward, came Yao's voice. You're going to want to see this. She returned to her secure quarters and activated the encrypted relay. A feed crackled into life, military-grade, zero-bounce signal, origin, sole defense perimeter. On screen, a human scout ship drifting above Neptune's orbit. Its sensors had caught something. What am I looking at? She asked. Yao's voice was grave. Look closer. The image zoomed. A metallic pod floated just beyond the magnetic fringe. No markings. No propulsion signature. Alien alloy composition, unfamiliar design. Dormant. Celine leaned forward. Dravari? We don't think so, Yao replied. But they're not claiming it. And it didn't arrive through council routes. She stared at the object. It looked dropped. Like someone had tossed it just close enough for Earth to find. A test. Or a message, Yao said. We're running diagnostics now. But there's something else. The feed shifted. A still frame from inside the pod. An open slot where a data crystal had clearly been removed. Whatever it was carrying, it's gone. Celine's mind sharpened. This wasn't over. 2 days later, she requested a private meeting with the Chancellor. He met her on the unlit balcony above the Council's archive vaults, a place of silence, history, and forgotten treaties. "You should be celebrating," Vren said, breaking the quiet. "There's no celebration when the fire's just been moved further from the house," Celine replied. The Chancellor smiled faintly. "You Terrans and your fire analogies." Celine stepped to the edge, gazing at the stars beyond the dome. "Do you believe the Council vote changes anything long-term?" she asked. "It bought you time. And it warned others. That's not a no." Vren folded his hands behind his back. "Some species won't need fleets. They'll send plagues. Saboteurs. Philosophy. It's not always brute force. We're ready for all of it," Celine said. "We've had centuries to prepare." He turned to face her. "And yet, your species remains unpredictable. Emotional. Dangerous even to itself." Celine's voice softened, but her gaze never wavered. "You think we don't know that? We carry that knowledge like a scar under the skin. But that danger is why we survive." She took a breath. "And if anyone out there still doubts that Earth belongs here, remind them what we do when cornered." Vren gave her a look of almost paternal respect. "You've changed the narrative. But Earth will never be seen as harmless again." Celine's reply was immediate. "Good." Back on her diplomatic cruiser, she stared out at the void as Earth receded in the viewport. Behind her, fire, violence, and the kind of chaos that forged steel from fragile things. Ahead, a galaxy now watching with wary eyes. But she didn't fear them. She feared complacency. Her final message to the Council would go down in interstellar archives, replayed in political chambers and military academies for centuries. "We do not seek war. But if you bring it to us, know this: Earth will not be your conquest. It will be your crucible."